Okay, so we can see I've added in a couple of rugs that are going to be going in here. Let's see if I can get these a little. This was actually, this took maybe a half an hour to do once I decided on what the pattern was. And I think the reason that orangey red is kind of doing that vibrating thing is because it's the hues of the blue and the red are just like zzz. Okay, I added in this here. I'll explain that a little bit later. This is the top rug, the top where the most of this is going to be covered up by that little bed. And I used the polychromos pencils on it, and I just did some really simple little things on it. And then I added, I'm really in love with the Deco Art DuraClean Ultra Matte. And this is a varnish, not just a sealant. Does that make sense? I didn't have any problems with the pencil pulling up, except for here. A little bit of the orange and the red came off, like when I was painting it down and I pulled up my brush, because I'm just using a little flat brush to do it, and I noticed on the bristles there was a little tinge of orange. So I was really careful about that. It didn't do it with the purple, and it didn't do it with these greens. And it could be that I just, worked on this a little harder and left more residue. Now the other thing I did, dun, 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 you can see I put together the railings. Now the railings were pretty easy to put together. I think I just put them off because they're so fiddly, and you can see they aren't incredibly even. I'm not too happy about that, but this is my first time making railings like this. So you can see what I did is I made them in sections, so that, let's see, let's put the house in here. Oh, let's put the house together. If I can get this to go together. And I turn it this way. Wow, my cinematography skills just get better and better. So you can see here there's a tiny little notch where this kind of overlaps. I did that on purpose because I wanted it a little bit more adhesion to the back of the piece. So you can see this right here, there's going to be, I don't really like that. And once it's glued, it'll be pressed pretty close. But then these, I'm going to need to do a tiny bit of like a little notch right there. These will be resting. They're about 3 millimeters, so they go right over. This is 2 millimeters, and then and this right here, and they cover that up. And I really hate that this is still here. But I got to deal with it. So when the house goes together, one of the last things that'll be put on are these, and I sized them so that I can simply glue them down in sections, which worked way better. I created, I think I've still got it, a really super simple templates here for how long, and you can see I do my math. And I think there's one side, I think I must have erased it. So, wow, again, woo, great cinematography. I basically would just lay these down, and then I drew the little lines on the long part. I glued it to one side and let it sit. And I didn't use wood glue because I didn't want it to latch on. I wanted to have some maneuverability, and I knew that tacky glue with this kind of wood, when I say this kind of wood, I mean I took craft sticks, and here are a couple of the extras because I always make extras, and I just started ripping them down. This one was a mistake. It was 2 millimeters, and I was like, that's not quite enough. I need an extra millimeter. So the little pieces ended up being more of like get that to focus, more like the thickness of a matchstick. That's about as close as you're going to get. And I tried really hard to get them 1mm by 1mm. However, sometimes when I was cutting, you can see here, oh, this one's a little wider at the end, and sandpaper takes care of that. So I picked out the ones that were the most uniform and used those. So you can see them in my hand. They're all square. I went with the square because I just felt like the original dollhouse had circular dowels or rounded dowels. This, I went with a square because I just felt like it. And I wanted to see if this worked. If I had used rounded dowels, I then would have used my pin vise to make holes and then glued them in the holes, at least for the bottom piece of wood. That way they would have been a little stronger. So these have 2 coats of paint on them. I'm going to add a third coat of paint, and then I'm going to paint them with the DuraClear. Now, one of the reasons why I went with the DuraClear is because the paints that I'm using, that I have used here, are all made by the same company. And theoretically, when you are using paints that are all of the same manufacturer, you shouldn't have any problems with them bleeding or moving around. That's why with the colored pencil, I had just the tiniest, most insignificant problem here, which was quickly rectified, and no harm was done to anything. That's why I'm a big proponent of doing a test. I did this one first and nothing bad happened, and I'm like, oh, okay. It didn't pull up any of the pigment, but then it pulled it up here just a tiny bit. But that's why I like to do tests on things. So I'm going to paint these today, get the last coat on, and then let them dry, and then add the DuraCoat layer. And then I added a few more little bits in here, and now I'm going to do the wire for this. I'll show you how I'm doing the wire for this piece. And you can see here, let me put this in here. That's how that looks. There's a little rug, a little rag rug in front of the sink. Ta-da! Okay, I'll see you in the rest of the video where I show you how I do other stuff. Thank you, patrons. Okay, I lied. I really did want to show you how I put this together. However, the tininess of it proved to be a little more difficult than I had anticipated. Now, it looks pretty simple. I took, originally I thought, well, I've got some wire. I've got some jewelry wire here. I thought I'll just use this. That wasn't, first of all, it was a little bit more bendy than I wanted it to be. So I didn't use it. I cut off a piece, and then I thought, well, I've got some other little twisty tie sorts of things like this. Yeah, that's not going to work either. So that's not going to work. And of course, I've put everything away. Here, let's see. I've put everything away and then start to video. That's always really, really smart. What I ended up using were, let's see if you can see them through here. Yeah, you can see them right there. These are just little jewelry eye pins. This is what you would put a bead on and then put a little loop on the other end and hang it from earrings. Because I've got a few little bits and bobs in here that I've picked up. Because the dollar store is great for this kind of stuff. It's not stuff that I would necessarily make jewelry out of. Because it's not a very high quality metal. But it's great for little things like this. Little tiny sinks. And then I just, from my collection of seed beads, chose some in kind of a malachite finish to be, I put them at where the hole is, where I put the wire, and then I put them on the ends of each of the little bits. And you can see there on the end one. Gosh, I really wish that would focus. This is still wet. I'm not touching any of these. I used Gorilla Glue Clear for this because it's shiny when it dries, but it should hold everything. I've never had any problems with it holding metal to things. So I sunk the little pieces in, I don't know, about 3 or 4 centimeters. Not centimeters, millimeters. And then glued on the little ends, and that was the fidgety piece. So I tried to match up the beads as much as I could and get them as centered as I could. Because knowing that this will be seen from this angle, I went ahead and made a higher little spout just because I thought it would look nicer. And again, I'm kind of altering things that I remember because that's kind of how I wanted to do this. So I apologize for not showing you how I did this, but seriously, so much cursing with little beads flying everywhere. You know, I was very thankful I used my tweezers a lot. These things come in so handy for getting, you can see how much I use them. They're covered with grime, especially when it comes to taking pieces, little tiny pieces, and you don't want your big fat fingers in the way. Being able to hold them this way and then set things in, or holding them this way and very gently putting things in. The other ones I like these for picking up, and I think I paid like these guys came in a set, you know, it was like $5 on Amazon. Again, I hate having to buy on Amazon, but I'm poor. So thank you, because, you know, you guys helped me buy those. So thank you for that. But this is the final little version of the sink. I'm going to set it aside and not touch it for 24 hours while everything dries. And then it will be ready to install in the house, which means I can glue it into place in the house. So yeah, that's yeah. Thank you, patrons, and I'll see you in the next video.